Hello everyone, this is Gone Turbo, broadcasting to you over the World Wide Web. And this is Gaming for an Age, a series dedicated to talking about video games, technology, pop culture, and issues in our society. In today's broadcast, I wanted to talk about the question, do video games help us learn? I want to recognize that there's tons of video game research out there. Research about video games, research about video games and people, the effects on people, mostly. And there's arguments both positively and negatively about video games. You can probably find evidence to support what you're looking for by simply searching for it. So if you were to search, do video games help us learn? You'll probably find research that supports that yes, it in fact does. If you were to look for research that says, do video games cause evil tendencies, I'm sure there's people that have researched to find that, oh yes, it definitely does. My point is that the things I want to talk about in this broadcast are some of my experiences, my own personal feelings, but there is probably research that supports some of this. I've heard of it, I've never directly read it. And again, I always take all bits and pieces of research with a grain of salt because, again, the fact is you can probably find something out there that supports any argument. So what's the point in the end, right? Anyway, when I was a kid, I remember in fifth grade? Sixth grade. I think it was sixth grade. Maybe it was fifth or sixth grade. I don't know. It was fifth or sixth grade. We had in our school, in our classroom, maybe it was a fourth grade? I don't know. It was the late 80s. 86, 87, 88, 89, around there. 90. We had a computer. I'm not sure what type it was, but it had the black and green screen. And I remember we had a game, and I don't remember the name of it, but in this game you would traverse from screen to screen, from scene to scene, and you had to gather clues to, discover something. All I remember is having to find clues to continue on with your, exploration and then to try to solve something. I don't remember exactly what it was because I never really had a lot of time to do it. Which brings me to a point. This game was, it was fun. It was engaging, but it was reserved for the kids that were quote unquote smart and always finished their work first. So when they finished their work first, they could always hop on this game and go at it and have some fun. And as a student, I remember wanting to just get into playing this game because I was engaged in the problem-solving aspect of what it offered. It wasn't mindless stuff. It was really thought-provoking, deep thinking, deductive reasoning skills that that anybody that was playing it had to do. And to some degree, it was the only really engaging thing that I remember. I would say the only engaging thing, but I was truly engaged in wanting to do this. And I look back and say, is it because of the fact that it was on a computer and it was like a video game? I mean, the rudimentariness of it could have been done on a board game, a piece of paper. It was simply pictures, and you had to type in commands. You had to type in. You had to type in something. You had to type in some commands. I recall. And but I think perhaps the problem-solving nature of it, like, okay, I have this task here, I have to figure it out, was what was most engaging about it. And it was different. It was new. And my, I guess, regular classroom experience instruction, I don't know, maybe wasn't engaging my mind enough at that level, at that deep level of thinking and problem solving and kind of thing. I feel in that case I truly was learning. My mind was engaged in learning in a sense of, again, problem solving and reasoning. And that's what I really feel, and I think I believe there's research that supports this, that certain video games help expand or help our brain learn certain sets of skills, like problem solving, reasoning, deductive reasoning, spatial awareness, spatial skills. I look at open world types of games and I guess Skyrim is a great example. You're not linearly, just mindlessly doing something. You have to think about what you're doing, where you're going, who you are, and when you are engaged in a quest, there's thinking involved. There's problem solving involved. Some games that I've played that I think offer other opportunities to learn are, well, anything that have puzzles within them. I've played some of the Lego games, Lego Star Wars, Lego Lord of the Rings, and 3, 2, 1. And they offer a level of thinking and problem solving. You come across these puzzles, for lack of a better word, where you have to either, well, it's there's an element of building Legos into the area to solve a problem. It might be starting some sort of machine or gear kind of mechanism. It might be platform creating to figure out how to get to the next platform. I mean, there's all kinds of puzzles in those Lego games, and I think it's cool because obviously the target age for those games are younger people. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I mean, I played those games as well just to try them out, but it can offer younger people, kids, a chance to do some problem solving while they're playing a video game. I think it's pretty cool. I mean, there have been a multitude of games. Don't get me wrong that every video game is just mindless and there's a select few that are not. There are tons of games that are quest-based, that are problem-solving based, that are puzzle-based. I mean, they're abundant. I've mentioned this in my other broadcasts, but when I was young, this is okay. So probably late '80s, we got our first computer. It was a Tandy 1000, purchased at Radio Shack, and it was funny because the Young Sheldon TV show actually had a whole episode on the family purchasing a Tandy 1000 computer, and it was so nostalgic. I was like, I went through that whole thing. But a little bit later on, into the 90s, CD-ROM obviously was popular, and computer games started to really take off as home computers became more popular. One game I remember playing was Seventh Guest. It was kind of a haunted mansion kind of game where you went from room to room and had to solve puzzles in each room to move forward and to understand and figure out who the seventh guest was. It was cool. It was spooky. The graphics were awesome for the time, and it was all puzzle based. You had to figure out in each room what to do by clicking on things. And a lot of these kind of click and point and click kinds of games were popular. Myst was another game that I think I remember playing a demo of. I think I got a demo on a cereal box. I'm not kidding. And a couple levels, and that was, I remember, being pretty popular. And again, kind of scene to scene, having to figure out the quest, figure out the mystery, figure out the puzzles. A lot of these games required a notepad and pen right next to your computer, right next to you to be able to take notes and write things down. Which again just really expands your mind and your thinking. So opportunities to think and to engage your brain in problem solving is a higher skill that video games can, exercise, for lack of a better word. But CD-ROM games continued to be popular while CD-ROMs were in existence. A lot of kids' games. Schools had a plethora of CD-ROM games that allowed kids to hop on the computer and point and click to build math and reading skills, mostly reinforcement kinds of things. So, you might be doing a fun character-based game that kids like, that you had to go into different puzzles and what might reinforce reading skills or sounds of letters or math skills, things like that. That kind of stuff, a little bit more, reinforcing of facts, reinforcing of skills, and more scratching the surface of some of these deeper level thinking games. But now we're a little bit more able to go online, and there's plenty of free stuff online. Most of the free online games, you go to a website and just free online games. It's pretty pointless to some degree in terms of learning. I don't know if you remember games like, well, it's still popular, but like Cut the Rope. Things like that are more spatial oriented, and yes, can be engaging to the mind. Other games like Angry Birds, that was invented apparently by a physics teacher who was trying to teach kids about, force and angle and trajectory and things like that. Would one playing Angry Birds think that off the top of their head in the moment? No, we were just thinking about taking this bird, launching it across, and knocking to try to kill the pigs or knock over the pigs. But perhaps, under the surface, your brain is engaged in trying to gauge trajectory of your bird, and also as you get into launching them, where you might be trying to place your next bird. So in some cases there are benefits to some of these newer apps or online games. But so many games these days on console are, I would say, are beneficial to learning. I mentioned Skyrim. I think any sort of quest type of game that helps us have to figure out and problem solve is beneficial. I guess, a lot of open world kinds of games lend themselves to these quest-based kinds of formats. A game like, I guess some of our earlier generation games that were more linear in nature, where you had to go from point A to point B, and I'm thinking specifically about first-person shooters, where you were simply going from point A to point B and killing everything along the way. Your brain is engaged, but not probably to the level of some of these other examples I've talked about today. Some of the more recent games that I think have really expanded a gamer's level of thinking is Minecraft. Minecraft has been probably one of the most popular games now of all time because of the nature of it. I mean, nothing like it has ever been created before. And it has a creative mode to it, which there in itself is, evident of the fact that the whole purpose is to create. But, in terms of the survival aspect of it, you obviously need to think about resources and think about how you craft and what you do to build. Creative mode, again, everything's open to be able to build, and you can create what you'd like. You can do what you'd like with the objects that you have. And no matter what mode you use in Minecraft, you're engaging your brain pretty heavily. So Minecraft's a good one, I think. But along the further lines of survival kinds of games, there is a high level of thinking when it comes to survival types of games. If I plug in a whole bunch of mods in Skyrim that are survival based, it's a lot different. The game is totally different, and I'm doing different things. I'm approaching the game differently with survival mods active. I am trying to, manage my character, my existence in the game, to make sure that I am thinking about what I'm going to be doing next. And there's quite a few survival kinds of games out there that allow you to have to manage your character to be able to survive in a different kind of way, where you're really thinking about the next steps. You're anticipating the next step while you're playing along. What are the next 3 steps? that you have to do. So these are all examples of games and types of games that can expand your thinking. One could argue that any video game, any kind of video game, there's thinking involved. Obviously, there is thinking involved in any kind of game. Yes, the nature of a game is obviously to think. Board game, athletic game, card game, video game, backyard game. you obviously have to think, but different kinds of games within the realm of video games can engage our brains a little bit further than others. As I wrap this conversation around to some sort of conclusion, I think everyone needs to understand that learning is different from, well, the process of learning and engaging our brains at a higher level of thinking is different from just learning facts. All right, there's a big difference between, and I'll give you a classroom example. A traditional based educational system where you're sitting in a classroom and the teacher or professor, think about our college days, right, is standing in front of everybody just lecturing. We lecture, we take notes, we take a test, we regurgitate anything he or she has told us or that we've learned from a textbook. And how well we do in regurgitating that information is how well we do in the class, which has traditionally been an indicator of how smart we are. And it's really not a good measure. And there's a lot of movements in the educational world to change that. That's not an indicator of learning or how intelligent you might be. It doesn't really demonstrate that you understand the content. It's just that you understand what one person has told you, that you're able to remember. Video games don't even come close to touching that realm of traditional learning that has not worked for us as human beings. Getting into some of my personal opinions here for sure, but video games don't tell us or make us memorize facts. Yes, you have to remember things, perhaps, but we're not regurgitating information later on to say, "Oh yeah, we're good at this game. We're smart at this game, or we are intelligent because of that way of learning." Video games expand the level of how our brain is engaged beyond that. So, Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's taxonomy, if you're not sure what it is, Google it, and you'll see the different levels of thinking and brain engagement that we're capable of doing. And I think video games are, can be higher up on the taxonomy. And I bring it around to that game in 5th, 6th grade that I played. I was engaged, not because it was, it's a video game and he wants to play it because it's a video game and everybody wants to play it because it's a video game, but that it was engaging my mind at a much higher level than I was getting in just sitting in the classroom all day. And that's really the point of this, and that was the best example that I ever had in my life. to realizing and to be able to have this conversation with you today. If it wasn't for that moment, I wouldn't be having this conversation and putting this broadcast out now. It is something that is pretty remarkable. So, to wrap up, leave a comment on what you think about learning and video games, and if you have any other examples of games you tried in your life that were incredibly engaging, thought-provoking, a higher level of learning. And I appreciate you listening and commenting, liking, and subscribing. Thanks for listening, everybody. This has been Gone Turbo. I'll talk to you again soon. At this time, I wanted to provide an addendum to this broadcast. I had some thoughts initially that I wanted to incorporate into the broadcast that I completely forgot. So I'm going to add them here. They are probably two incredibly important topics to talk about that relate to this topic of do video games help us learn. And the first one is really something that I have directly experienced, have enjoyed, and for me personally has helped me to understand something a little bit better. And that is when video games are historically accurate. You could probably already think of some that maybe you've played or heard about that offer a level of historical accuracy. The two genres for me, or historical realms, that I have enjoyed have been World War II and the Assassin's Creed games that are, to some degree, historically accurate. I had always had a passion for World War II history ever since a kid, and as I got older and I seemed to become more interested in it as I got older, and it was I think just ironic timing that when I really got interested and was reading about it, and just wanting to learn more, certain pop cultural things around World War II started to come out. On the one hand, we had Saving Private Ryan, which seemed to kind of spearhead some of this stuff. We did have the 60th anniversary of D-Day 2004. Well, D-Day, but also, D-Day. Series like Band of Brothers came out, and video games, consoles were able to start to provide a higher level of visuals, of sound, storytelling that allowed worlds to be created that producers, designers, whatever you want to say, were creating them historical, for the most part, historically accurate. I remember, some of the bonus features of video games. Medal of Honor Frontline was one that really was probably the first World War II game that I played that really captured a lot of my interest, or expanded my interest, and just helped me learn more about World War II. And although some parts weren't exactly historically accurate, it at least got me interested in wanting to learn more and explore more. This was on the heels of the first Call of Duty on the PC, which was incredibly popular, and I think was what spearheaded World War II first-person shooters. The Medal of Honor games, Medal of Honor Allied Assault, I had on an old MacBook, and I could only do it on the lowest settings because of the power of the MacBook that I had. I actually still own the disc, and it was engaging. It really wanted me to learn more. This race to make the most accurate representation of the guns was something I remember reading about with video games as they were coming out. Call of Duty on the Xbox, original Xbox, Call of Duty, and I can't remember, there was Big Red 1, and then there was, I think, one before that. Gosh, it was not good. It was not the PC game we had hoped for. Games like Medal of Honor, Frontline was really good from what I remembered playing. But my point here is that with each World War II game, I learned new things. Because they were historically accurate, and I could engage myself into wanting to find out more through other means, books, online research, just learning about it. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention one of my favorite games of all time, so much that I actually ended up buying it twice. I'll explain that in a moment, but the Brothers in Arms game, Brothers in Arms Road to Hill 30, was a game that came out on, for me it was a original Xbox, and it incorporated first-person shooter with some tactical strategy gameplay as well. This whole idea of suppress and attack, and or fire and maneuver, I guess. That game, I know, received awards for its historical accuracy, and I played that game so much when I got it. It was incredible. It is incredible. There were documentaries on this game. They actually took actual maps of the areas that the maps of the games were built on. I mean, it's like you were right there on the crossroads in Carentan, and just accurate. It was incredible. I actually have a review. I actually bought it for the Wii, which I haven't talked about the Wii at all in any of these broadcasts, but bought it for the Wii because of the peripheral nature of it, and I actually have a review of it on my channel, probably way down at the very bottom of my video list. Anyway, but that game, there was a second one that came out just as good, that provided a high level of historical accuracy to the World War II genre. I will say that as time passed and World War II first-person shooters started to saturate enough where we were ready for something else. I mean, there was kind of a stop to World War II first-person shooters until recently. Call of Duty World War II on the Xbox One and other platforms. They basically stopped for a long period of time, and they started to, I guess, lose a little bit. They were still historically accurate in the look, the weapons, the sounds, the uniforms. But I think some of the battles were more based on events. Some of the levels were more based on events, and as multiplayer has become really more of a way to play first-person shooters, and less on campaign mode, even though campaign mode still does exist. I think there's been less specific thought and design in World War II games being exactly historically accurate. The other two games, in regards to Assassin's Creed, that got me interested in other genres or other time periods that I had always had an interest in, was Assassin's Creed 3 and Assassin's Creed 4, which was the Black Flag game. Assassin's Creed 3 was around the American Revolution, and as an American citizen, I obviously know things about my history of my country, but it was kind of neat to relive it in some way, and to put myself in the events through kind of this virtual reality kind of way, through this game. Obviously not exactly historically accurate, but based on true events. Let's just put it that way. What I really loved about Assassin's Creed Black Flag was that it was historically accurate in what this whole era of piracy was really about. And I've had, maybe like a lot of you, and maybe as young boys and even girls, a fascination for pirates. It's a mythological kind of thing, and has its own distinct and unique myth to it. Pirates of the Caribbean movies launched, just like World War II interests, launched a cultural phenomenon where, I don't know, liking pirates again became a thing even for adults to get into. And there is this myth around, pirates in a kind of a stereotypical way, being, a parrot on the shoulder and an eye patch and a peg leg and captain and Captain Hook kind of thing, and plundering and burying treasure. And that's not necessarily the historical case. Yes, pirates did attack and plunder ships in the Caribbean and throughout, not just the Caribbean, but throughout the world. Piracy is still a real thing in 2018 by definition. But understanding that that things that took place with some of these more famous pirates weren't always necessarily just evil and burying treasure and drinking rum. I was very impressed with how the game portrayed and told the story of Edward Thatch, or also known as Edward Teach, or also known as Blackbeard. How they portrayed that. Now, they could have taken that character, and the game could have been totally different, or any pirate game could have been totally different, around yo ho ho swashbuckling, Peter Pan pirate kind of thing. But it was accurate in that what he did, what Blackbeard did as a pirate, was portrayed in that game. He really did, obviously, go to the Carolinas and demand medicines for his crew. It wasn't touchy-feely and all peace. It was brutal, and it was he was a pirate. But my point is that video games have been able to allow us to learn, and I'm being a little bit of a hypocrite here in terms of facts, but when it comes to history, there are factual things that we know, and video games can help with that understanding of factual things. Which brings me to what I think will be something that will happen in the future. And I there's part of me that would love to be a part of this to some degree, but I don't have the background to do this, but I would love to, and that is to create historical events through virtual reality, where the person or the player can immerse themselves in the event or the time period and do certain things, but it be a little bit more academic in nature. So, a game like Assassin's Creed or a World War II first-person shooter is obviously not going to be suitable for a school curriculum. But if the violence and I guess a lot of the gameplay, in a sense, was taken out or adjusted, students in the future could not just read about the American Revolution in a textbook or watch a movie on it, or like a I don't know, a role-played kind of History Channel kind of movie, but something that is digitally created, and by then there'll probably be pretty photorealistic kinds of graphics happening, where people, kids, students, anybody could engage in these worlds and interact in some ways. A huge step ahead from the CD-ROM days when you could hit the Oregon Trail, to actually experiencing it in almost a real life way. That's going to be a great example. Oregon Trail from back in the day to Oregon Trail pretty much virtual. Could you imagine how awesome that would be? And any event in history that is designed and created to allow kids to, and again, anybody, to be a part of an experience virtually, would be really cool. Would be really awesome. So thanks for listening to this long addendum, and I'll talk to you again soon.